Hey everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm not so sure if this is working. Looks a little weird. So let's try. Oh, there. Is things working? Are things working? Hopefully somebody shows up and can tell me if you can hear me. That would be nice. Um, so I am going to talk about Dracula because we need to be talking about Dracula. Um, I see someone's here. If you can hear what I'm saying, please let me know. That would be very nice because I'm using this headset that I don't normally use for the live streaming, and I just wanted to make sure it's still working. Um, so Dracula is now on Netflix. It aired the first episode aired on New Year's Day on the BBC. The second and third episodes aired on the 2nd and 3rd of January, and midnight today, January 4th. It all is available on Netflix because it was a co-production. It is made by the gentleman who did Sherlock, which catapulted Benedict Cumberbatch into the world of pop culture and into the Marvel universe. So it is done by Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat. Stephen Moffat basically took over after the David Tennant years on Doctor Who and gave us Matt Smith and gave us Peter Capaldi's Doctor's runs. Um, and probably one of the most popular episodes of Doctor Who, which was Blink. A lot of people will argue with you that Stephen Moffat wrote that. He, in fact, did. Mark Gatiss, on the other hand, is also a showrunner alongside Stephen Moffat for Sherlock and is also a showrunner on Dracula. He is also in Dracula. He plays a character that I will talk about later because I don't want to get into spoilers yet, but there will be spoilers. I'm going to try. Well, the thing is, it's Dracula. If you don't know the story of Dracula, um, by now, I don't. He's a vampire. So the show is amazing. And what Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss did with the story of Dracula is something that is very, very, very hard to do. And that is make it new. And I am a vampire lover. I love Dracula, if you can't tell from right there. I am a huge vampire nut. I love Dracula. I love old school Hammer horror films. I've talked about those in the past on here. If you can't tell, I'm a horror nut. Um, so, but Dracula to me is like a blanket. Wrap up in him and the story of him, and it's my happy place. This is a new take on Dracula, which infuses within it just some themes and some interesting takes and just a neat take on the character. Um, Gatiss and Moffat are British, and they come from the land of Hammer Films, where Sir Christopher Lee ruled as the Lord of the Undead. And within one thing that I really was so giddy about with this series, and I say series, it's really three movies. Much like Sherlock, they're 1 hour and a half, hour and 45-minute long episodes, but they're really films. And with Dracula, it's it's one continuous story, not like with Sherlock where you had different cases to focus on. But how they did it, they can stand alone, and they're really um, just beautiful, beautiful design, great acting, just just fantastic. And the thing with Moffat and Gatiss, when it's something that they feel passionate about and they love and they're fans of, when they write about it, it comes across. You know that they know their stuff. You see the love for the subject matter in them. That's why when either one of them wrote something for Doctor Who, it was so good. And especially with Mark Gatiss, who is a complete fanboy. I've met him a couple of times. I've met Stephen Moffat a couple of times. But Gatus, it's so much fun talking to him because he's got this twinkle in his eye every time that he's talking about something he loves. And he grew up one of us. And by that, I mean like a horror fan who grew up in the land of the Hammer films. And he's the geek that made good, kind of like Simon Pegg. Um, but with Gatus, it's great because he's all about these classic horror films and he really loves like the supernatural. He loves old ghost stories. There's another project that he did that you can actually, somebody uploaded it on YouTube called, oh, it's an M.R. James story. And it's something that they released because there's um, a ongoing thing that in England they would always, for some reason, and it's so weird but neat at the same time, they would tell ghost stories at Christmas. And uh, Mark Gatiss embraced that, and so he does. He loves M.R. James, who is a wonderful ghost story writer. Who you've probably heard of some of the short stories that he's done. Well, they filmed one for Christmas this year, and it's fantastic. You can find it on YouTube. If it hasn't been pulled yet, not supposed to be up there. That's a big no-no. BBC will get you in trouble. I've learned that the hard way. Anyway, um, let's talk about Dracula. So the series has some notable, um, probably fairly familiar faces from the British world of acting. Gatiss himself plays in it. Dracula is played by an actor, and I'm going to butcher his name. I keep doing this. Klaus Bang is how you say it, I think. Claes. Anyway, he plays Dracula, and he really is the bastard son of Christopher Lee and Bela Lugosi. He really looks the part. He's like 6'4". He's 52 years old and looks amazing. And he's brutal and sarcastic and funny and suave and animalistic. And he just really embraces all of those aspects. And that's something that Christopher Lee did. Maybe not so much the humor part, at least in the Hammer films, but he could switch between being the suave, um, you know, erudite man to a snarling, slathering beast. And that's what Bang does so well in this. And he also is just funny. Um, and you got to think about it in the way that they've created this Dracula who is so utterly alone and he has to amuse himself. And so, and the other aspect of this that I really like, and it's something that I've seen meant within other books and other vehicles, but not as much. I mean, it's not as prevalent as the use of blood and how when Dracula feeds, he imbibes the essence and the knowledge of the person that he is drinking. So the blood really is the life and it's the story and the person. So how he is able to learn and how they explain away him having a British accent is the fact that he fed off Jonathan Harker and has learned how to be this suave British man and has this accent. And he keeps it throughout the show. Um, it's just so well done and thought out and beautiful. And Gatiss and Moffat, I know especially Gatiss talked about what Dracula's they really pulled from. And it's obvious that they really pulled from the Hammer films. Um, there are some little in jokes in there and things that made me go hee because I recognize what they were. Um, Especially the last episode is just chocked full of them. Little Easter eggs, little things that if you know what to look for, if you're a fan, they've kind of hidden this stuff within. Um, the acting, as I said, is just first rate, so good. And the writing is so witty and the banter is so great. Now, one thing that I had been kind of like, oh, really about was, and we're kind of going into spoiler territory here, so just be aware, was the fact that the Van Helsing character in this was a woman. It's such a cliche now that we're going to make the male character a female, and that's going to make it mean more or something. Well, in this case, and this is something for me to say this because I wanted that guy right there to be Van Helsing in this so bad. Capaldi, oh, you are my Peter Cushing. Um, I loved Agatha Van Helsing. I loved the character. She was played by Dolly Wells. Dolly Wells is great in this. One thing I really, really liked about Dracula, they didn't young it up. And for a character like Dracula to really have the gravitas that he's supposed to have, you can't have some 15-year-old, 20-year-old kid play Dracula and really get it pulled off. It's not something that can be done unless that actor is just the best ever to have been born, because Dracula has to carry a weight of centuries to him. He's got to have some age to him. And that's why I loved, you know, we'll go back to Doctor Who here. That's why I think Peter Capaldi was one of the best doctors we've ever had, because he knew that and he brought that to the role. Um, with Dracula, it's the same thing. Dracula has to have the centuries on his in his eyes. You have to be able to convey that. And that's what Klaus Bangs does in this. He brings it as Dracula. He's he's and he shows that you don't have to be some young buck to be this you know, seductive character. He is gorgeous. He's perfect for it. I really loved his Dracula. And the same goes for Agatha Van Helsing. She's not a young thing. She's older than me by a couple of years. And yet she holds her own. She's fascinating. She's funny. She's smart. She's witty. She doesn't take Dracula's shit. And it's great to see her in this part because typically you're going to have the 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 slayer, if you will, is going to be some boobtastic young girl. No slam against Buffy, but she was a young teenage girl, real pretty and everything. What with Agatha, she's she's just perfect. She's not a model, but it doesn't matter. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, that's the reason I'm bringing this up. I thought she was beautiful, and she was perfect for that. And I liked how they utilized her being a woman. Um, there wasn't like some overt message here with it. It was she and Dracula were equals, and it was just great. It wasn't about neither one of them. Was it about sex. That's another thing with this is there's a sexuality and a sensuality with the character, but like Mark Gatiss said, um he's not out banging these people, even though his last name's Bang. Haha, but he's out feeding on them. It's it's a complete, instead of the sex part of it, it's even more what's the word I'm looking for here? I don't know. It's even more encompassing, like, and he devours and literally, and he absorbs and he takes you and you become part of him. And it's just such a cool way of looking at it. And I mean, that's the character has been like that for a long time, but so much emphasis in the last many years and decades has been the biting and sex with the vampires, like especially with True Blood. But that's not what's happening in this. And it's so well done how they convey what the bite is and the devouring and how the blood what that aspect of it is about. I also really love I also really love the undead aspect that is within it, and that they go further than The Walking Dead in terms of where they go with this whole monstrosity thing and being undead. Um, it's really just incredible because I know with Netflix, they may have had more of a budget than their normal, BBC production. Because you gotta remember this is state-funded television, they don't have, like, a lot of budget, but what they did and what they created and the style and look of this is so cool and beautiful. Um, I really loved it, and the whole undead aspect is even more terrifying than Dracula. Um like, there's there's a part in it, I'm trying to stay as spoiler free as I can, but there is a part within it where he's talking and he's describing how even though you're dead or undead, as the case may be, you are still there. And they show it in such a way like you're still aware and you can still feel. And it's absolutely horrifying. And it's it's really just so well played how they convey the horror of what is happening. You've probably seen the trailer where the fly goes into the eyeball and all of that, and that is just cringe inducing. And that happens. The flies are a thing. That probably goes into the whole, the devil and the flies and the, death. Um, but man, it's so good. But I just have to tell you, it's so pretty and so well acted and touching. There's a really beautiful aspect to all of this and the story and how it just wraps up on the third I was hoping this would continue. I don't know if they're going to continue this, and I kind of don't know if I want them to, because it was such a perfect story and how it ended. And um, they surprised a lot of people with where they went with it, and yet it kept the core story of Dracula in the book and the characters in the series. Um, I just can't say enough about it. It's so well done. Um, so that's all I have on this. I just can't say enough. Go watch Dracula. It's on Netflix now, parts 1 through 3. They're about an hour and a half each. If you wanna space them out, do it. Uh, you know, make it last, as Dracula says in the show. Check it out. I can't say enough about Dracula. It's just Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat made something really, really, really perfect and beautiful. Um, and, yeah, I it was worth the wait. Hopefully, when they do the DVD release or Blu-ray release, we will get the In Search of Dracula special that Gatiss did, where he goes back and talks about the history of Dracula in film, the history of Dracula in literature. He even interviews all of the living starlets from Hammer Films together. There's a big scene of them all together. And they talk about creating this new version, and where everybody's like seems to think that um, what more can you do with Dracula? What more can you do with this character, or even Frankenstein, um, or the Wolfman, or the Invisible Man? Where where can you go with that now? I mean, it's been done to death. Mm. Well, guess what? It hasn't. It's the same with when you have these archetypes and these stories that are so classic, like Dracula, like Frankenstein, the Invisible Man, and all of that. When you have these stories and these icons, those stories are so are made in such a way that you can take the core of them and use them to speak to many different things. For example, in this version of Dracula, the story is truly about not being afraid of death. Accept we're accepting fate, uh, not being afraid of what comes in the end. Um, that's a major part of what's in this story, and how keeping trying to keep away from death and being afraid of it and trying to fight it and all these things and can turn you into a true monster and lead to a lot of suffering and just you know you you turn into a monster trying to avoid the natural way. We all are going to die. It's going to happen no matter how much we fight it. That's eventually what happens to all of us. We're born dying. We're born to die. And so that story within Dracula is told in such a beautiful way and touches upon a lot of things. Um, I just interviewed Lee Winnell, who is making the new Invisible Man film. For Horror Hound, the magazine I write for, and I made a point of asking him, how do we keep returning to these archetypes and these characters, and you know, how do you make this new? And with the Invisible Man, he's taken a character and a story that's been around for a long, long time. It's been like in the early 1800s. All of these stories and books came out really close together. Um, but you've had this tale of a man who let science drive him mad and all of that. But in this version of the Invisible Man, he's already a monster. He just doesn't look it yet, and it's when he becomes invisible that you see the true man there, which is this monster who's pure just menace. And now he's the he epitomizes it as this invisible stalker. And they've used it to talk about a battered woman and trying to get away from an abusive relationship with the Invisible Man. I mean, that's where a story is truly epic when you can take it and talk about all these different things with it. And that's the same with Frankenstein. Frankenstein can be used to talk about many things. Once again, the whole, going against nature, and also the mentality of people hating what they don't understand. That's brilliant. And that's what you can do with these archetypes and these stories. You can keep finding and delving into them for more and more material. And that's what really was done here with Dracula this year. And, you know, doing the Lord's work, Mark Gatiss, Stephen Moffat, you go. So check out Dracula. It is on Netflix now. Episodes 1, 2, and 3, all there for you to stream. Watch them this weekend. I can guarantee you'll love it. It is so good, so unique, and amazing stuff. And especially if you're a fan of Hammer films, and like I am, and grew up watching Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing be amazing, you're going to geek out over this. Especially the makeup that they did for Class Bangs. He has the red contact lenses of Christopher Lee's bloody eyes and just looks fantastic. So anyway, guys, thank you so much. I'm glad I hope you enjoyed this. I'm glad you're here. And thank you for checking in. And I will talk to you soon with another review. And have a happy new year. I hope it's going to be a good one for everybody. See you guys. Bye.